The village of Ore rested quietly in the valley, surrounded by thick forest and lush farmlands. Today was like any other. Children played, women pounded yam in their compounds, and men walked in the fields. But there was an undercurrent of excitement in the air, a kind that only surfaces when something out of the ordinary was going to happen. Today, that excitement came from Adebanjo, a prosperous farmer who had been away for weeks and was now returning with his new bride. The village gathered in anticipation as Adebanjo led Abeni, his new wife, through the dusty streets. She was breathtaking, her skin as smooth as polished ebony, her eyes sharp and bright. All the villagers were ogling to get a glimpse of her as she came down from the car that had brought her to the village. Oh, she was beautiful, they murmured. As Adebanjo led his new bride to his living room where his parents waited with anticipation, something unexpected happened. Julie, Adebanjo's dog of many years, hurriedly came to greet his owner. But immediately he set his eyes on Abeni, the dog froze for a second, and then it began barking wildly and even angrily. Adebanjo glanced at Julie, wondering what was wrong with him today. He was usually a peaceful dog. He hurriedly led Abeni towards the door of the living room as Julie continued to bark uncontrollably. Nobody paid any attention to Julie barking. They just attributed it to how dogs always bark at strangers before they get to know them better. 2 days later, Adebanjo was taking his new bride to greet the elders of the village in each of their homes. This was the tradition in Ore village, and all the elders had been waiting excitedly to meet Abeni, their new bride. They had heard how beautiful she was, and they were really proud of Adebanjo and looking forward to seeing her today. As Adebanjo and Abeni walked along the street, everyone noticed that every dog in the village barked ferociously at Abeni, baring their teeth and trying to bite her. As Abeni slowed down her steps, hiding behind Adebanjo, he assured her, saying, "It's nothing, just the dogs being protective." Adebanjo muttered as he glanced nervously at Abeni. Her face was unreadable, though she appeared slightly scared. The villagers, who were used to their dogs greeting newcomers with mere curiosity, exchanged uneasy glances. They could not understand why the dogs were barking angrily. The villagers whispered among themselves as the couple walked past, their eyes following Abeni's every move. Her steps were light, almost too light, as if her feet barely touched the earth. But the villagers didn't think too much of it. They just thought the dogs would get used to her as time goes by. A few weeks had passed since Abeni's arrival. She was nice, and the villagers liked her. She always had a smile when she passed by, and no one had anything evil to say about her. But the dogs continued to bark every time she stepped outside, whether she was walking to the stream, buying food at the market, or simply standing outside her compound. It was relentless, as though the animals sensed something no one else could. And just like before, the villagers had an explanation for it. After all, Abeni was a stranger, and it was only natural for animals to be wary of someone new. But the dogs never stopped barking at her, even after several weeks of her being in the village. It didn't matter if she smiled at them or ignored them. Every time she appeared, the barking began afresh, each time louder and angrier than the previous time. One day, Abeni went to the market to do some shopping. 2 women, Olabisi and Iyasimi, stood near a fruit stall, speaking in hushed voices while keeping an eye on Abeni as she looked through the yams. "Do you see how the dogs act around her?" Olabisi said, lowering her voice even further. Iyasimi nodded, a frown on her face. "It's not natural. They bark like they've seen something evil." Olabisi glanced nervously at Abeni, who seemed oblivious to the attention she was drawing. "They say dogs can see what we cannot see." "Spirits," Iyasimi whispered, her voice very audible. "They say spirits return in the form of the living, but dogs always know them. From across the market, Adebanjo caught sight of the two women talking and quickly ushered Abeni away. He had begun to notice the change in the villagers too. They no longer greeted Abeni with the same warmth. Their smiles were tight and their eyes filled with suspicion. It was like a shadow had fallen over the village, one that grew darker with each passing day. At night, as Adebanjo and Abeni lay in bed, the barking of the dogs echoed outside their window as usual. The villagers had started to complain of the ceaseless barking, as not only was it disturbing their peace, but it was making them uncomfortable. Adebanjo's sleep became restless, plagued by dreams he couldn't even remember. And sometimes he would wake up to find Abeni, his bride, sitting by the window, staring out into the night, her expression blank. "Abeni," he would ask, his voice thick with sleep, "what are you looking at?" She would turn to him, her eyes distant. "Nothing, just the night." Adebanjo loved her so much, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else, something she was not telling him. The village of Ore had always been a peaceful and happy place. They never experienced famine or any epidemic. They were happy people. But just a few weeks ago, strange and unusual things started happening. One day, Olusegun the farmer, who lived at the outskirts of the village, complained of finding 3 of his goats dead one morning. Just dead like that. Then babies started to fall ill with a fever that no herbal remedy could cure. And as if that was not enough, the village stream, which had always flowed with clear and steady water, began to dry up, even though it wasn't the dry season yet. This was strange, and the villagers started complaining, wondering what could have gone wrong. The elders gathered in Baba Ifa's compound, their worried faces lined with concern. Baba Ifa, the village's oldest and most respected diviner, listened to the complaints in silence, his eyes narrowed in thought. As they discussed, one of the elders suddenly said, "This all began when Adebanjo brought that new wife of his." The other elders turned to him thoughtfully. "But what has she done?" asked another elder. "She has harmed no one." "I did not say she has harmed anyone," the first elder argued. "I am only saying this all started after she came to this village. Have you forgotten how the dogs always bark when she appears?" "That does not mean she's the cause of any of this," another elder chimed in. "It's not what she has done," Baba Ifa said slowly. "It's what she is." The room fell into a tense silence. Baba Ifa's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "What are you suggesting, Baba Ifa?" one of the elders asked cautiously. Baba Ifa's gaze grew distant, as though he was looking beyond the walls of the hut into some far-off place. "There are forces older than this village, older than any of us. Spirits who have been wronged, who cannot rest. They walk among us, and they do not belong to the world of the living." The elders shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to say it aloud, but the implication was clear. Abeni, beautiful, mysterious Abeni, was no ordinary woman. But why had Baba Ifa not said anything before now? The elders were not sure how to take this news that Baba Ifa was telling them. They dispersed, still with worry in their hearts, promising to meet again in 3 days. Meanwhile, in Adebanjo's compound, things had taken a darker turn. One night, Adebanjo woke up in the middle of the night to find Abeni standing in the middle of the compound, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. He called her name, but she didn't respond right away. When she finally did, it was as though she had been far away, in a place beyond his reach. "What is wrong, Abeni?" he asked her. "I've been having strange dreams," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Dreams of things I can't remember, but they feel familiar. I don't even know how I got to be standing here in the first place." Adebanjo comforted her, telling her that it was just the stress of being new to the village. Maybe she was just trying to get used to the new environment. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. He had begun to feel worried, and most nights he felt the presence of something watching them and waiting. One evening, when Adebanjo returned home from the fields to find Baba Ifa waiting for him outside his compound, the old man's face was drawn, his eyes hard. "Adebanjo, we need to talk." Adebanjo's stomach churned with unease. "About what?" "Your wife." Adebanjo stiffened. "What about her?" Baba Ifa motioned for him to sit down and said, "There's something unnatural about her. The village is suffering, and it all began when she arrived. We must perform a cleansing ritual to ensure there are no bad spirits amongst us." Adebanjo's heart raced. He had heard the whispers, the rumors in the village, but he had refused to believe them. "Abeni is not a spirit, Baba Ifa. She's my wife." Baba Ifa shook his head. "Are you sure? Have you ever questioned why the dogs won't stop barking at her?" Adebanjo felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "She's not a spirit, and the dogs are just not used to her." "Wake up, Adebanjo. You must let us perform the ritual," Baba Ifa interrupted. "If there's nothing wrong, then all will be well. But if she's what I suspect..." His voice trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Adebanjo was confused. He loved Abeni, but even he couldn't deny that something seemed wrong. The dreams, the dogs, the strange occurrences, could they all be connected? Was it possible that Abeni wasn't who or what he thought she was? That night, he lay awake beside Abeni, staring at the ceiling. He had made up his mind. The ritual would go ahead. He told Abeni about it, and even though she refused at first, he convinced her that it was better to do the ritual so that the village would not blame her for the strange occurrences in the village. So she agreed. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to tell me in the comments what you think happened next. I want to see how close you are to what actually happens next. The night of the ritual was heavy with anticipation. The entire village gathered in the square, their torches casting long shadows across the ground. Baba Ifa stood at the center, holding his staff of office, carved with ancient symbols of protection. Adebanjo stood nearby, his heart pounding in his chest as Abeni was brought forward. She stood quietly in the circle of the villagers, her face calm, her eyes betraying no emotion. The dogs began barking again, louder and more frantic than ever before. Their barking echoed through the village, sending chills down the spines of everyone present. Baba Ifa raised his staff, beginning the incantation. His voice rang out, calling upon the ancestors, asking for their guidance. As the chant grew louder, Abeni began to tremble. Her body shook and her eyes rolled back in her head. A low, unusual moan escaped from her lips as she trembled. The villagers exchanged fearful glances, their hearts racing with fear. Adebanjo stepped forward, concern showing on his face. "Abeni," he shouted, his voice breaking through the incantation. "What is happening to you?" But she didn't respond. Instead, she seemed to be in a trance, her body moving of its own accord. Suddenly, she let out a chilling laugh. A sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. The laughter echoed, layered in an unsettling harmony that suggested voices from beyond the grave. Baba Ifa continued his chant, raising his staff even higher. "We call upon the spirits to reveal the truth. Show us what lies hidden in the shadows." The air thickened, and an unnatural wind swept through the square, supernaturally turning off the torches one by one. Darkness enveloped all the villagers, and panic started among them as they groped for where to go, fear gripping their hearts. Everywhere grew silent, and even the dogs stopped barking. Then, in the midst of the darkness, a female figure materialized. She was huge and fearful. Her eyes glowed with a strange light that lit up the darkness as she floated towards Abeni, who remained frozen in place. "Abeni," the figure whispered, her voice a haunting echo. "You have returned at last." The villagers gasped as they watched in disbelief. Abeni's expression suddenly changed, going from confusion to recognition as she murmured, "Mother." The revelation hit Adebanjo like a thunderclap. "What is happening? Who are you?" he demanded of Abeni, his voice shaking. The figure turned her glowing gaze towards him. "I am the spirit of the woman you call Abeni. She is my daughter, but her time in the land of the living was cut short. I brought her back to fulfill unfinished business." The villagers stood in silence, struggling to comprehend what was unfolding before them. The atmosphere was tense, filled with an overwhelming sense of fear. Baba Ifa stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos. "What unfinished business? What do you seek?" The ghostly woman's expression shifted, her sorrowful eyes narrowing. "My daughter was meant to bring peace to this village, but a great wrong was done to her, and it must be righted before she can find rest." The dogs were barking, not out of malice for Abeni, but to warn you of the darkness that lingers in this village. The villagers listened in rapt attention, their fears mingling with a sense of intrigue. Adebanjo felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he listened. "What betrayal?" Adebanjo asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "What do you need us to do?" The ghost gestured towards Abeni, whose body was still trembling as if she was fighting for control. Many years ago, Abeni was a new bride in this village, so many years ago. Her husband suddenly passed away from poisoning, and Abeni was accused by the villagers of poisoning her husband, with not even a single investigation being done. Even though she continually said she was innocent, no one listened to her. She was banished to the evil forest with a 3-month pregnancy. She died in that forest, even though she was innocent. But her spirit has been roaming the evil forest ever since. She has not been able to rest. To allow her to rest, you must confront the truth of the past and right the wrongs. An innocent woman was killed, and now her spirit haunts your land, seeking justice. The villagers exchanged nervous glances, recalling the event that had happened many years ago about a woman in the village who had been accused of poisoning her husband. Coincidentally, it was Adebanjo's uncle who had been poisoned. "You must confront the truth. You must find out who poisoned Abeni's husband many years ago," the ghost continued. "Only then will she and your land be able to find peace." Suddenly, the ghost raised her arms, and the dogs began barking again. But this time, their barks sounded mournful, as if they were lamenting a long-lost spirit. The villagers felt a wave of sorrow wash over them, memories of the past flooding their minds. As the ghostly woman continued to speak, Adebanjo felt a stirring within him. He realized that the death of his uncle many years ago had been blamed on his innocent wife. "We must atone our sins," he urged the villagers. "We cannot let this cycle of pain continue." The villagers murmured, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. A few of the older ones shifted uneasily, their memories clouded by the passage of time. But as Adebanjo looked around, he saw the fear and guilt etched on their faces. "Abeni, can you hear me?" he asked, turning back to her. Her body remained rigid, but a single tear slipped down her cheek. "We are very sorry for what happened. Please forgive us." Suddenly, Abeni gasped, her eyes wide as if awakening from a deep slumber. "I was innocent. Someone else poisoned my husband and put the blame on me. That person must confess. That person must confess." Baba Ifa began to chant once more, this time calling for healing and redemption, and asking the spirits to expose whoever was responsible for framing Abeni. The villagers joined in, their voices rising together in a chorus of unity. The sound reverberated through the square, drowning out the barks of the dogs and dispelling the shadows that clung to the night. All of a sudden, there was a loud cry from someone in the crowd. It was Adebanjo's mother, and she was shaking uncontrollably. I will confess, she was screaming. I will confess. Adebanjo was shocked. Mother, what is wrong? What are you confessing to? I poisoned Abeni's husband. It was me. The villagers gasped. You? Yes, she was crying softly. Abeni was a new bride at the time. When your uncle brought her home, everyone loved her. She was so kind and nice, always sharing her food with the villagers. And she cooked so well that everyone preferred her to me. I was jealous. She was getting all the attention, and to make the matters worse, she was a better weaver than me, so she was selling better than me in the village market. So one day, while she was not looking, I sneaked into their house and put some poison in her husband's food that she had set for him to eat. And that was how he died. I was the one who suggested to the villagers that Abeni had probably poisoned her husband's food, and that was why she was banished. I am very sorry. Please forgive me. The look of shock on everyone's face was unbelievable. So, Abeni had been innocent all those years ago. The villagers folded their hands in thought, feeling regret for what had happened all those years ago. The energy shifted once again, and the villagers started wailing, crying, and begging Abeni to forgive them. The villagers could see a small smile on Abeni's lips. Finally, she said, "The truth is out. The truth is out." Turning to Adebanjo's mother, Abeni said, "I forgive you." But just before she could finish the sentence, a sudden chill swept through the village square, and the dark figure of her mother emerged from the shadows. She loomed ominously, her eyes burning with fury as she advanced towards the gathering. "You dare to forgive her?" she hissed at Abeni, her words dripping with contempt. "You have forgotten your mission. She must pay." The villagers recoiled, fear flashing in their eyes. The dark spirit reached out, trying to snatch away Adebanjo's mother. But Abeni stepped forward. "I will not let you take her away," she shouted, her voice steady. "I forgive her, mother. There is no need for the suffering to continue. The truth is out." With that declaration, the villagers united, all bowing down, appeasing Abeni's mother to forgive them. In one final surge of determination, Abeni stepped forward, her voice breaking through the chants. "I forgive you," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I forgive all of you for the pain you caused me. Let peace reign in your land." And in that moment, a blinding light engulfed the square, the darkness disappearing as Abeni and her mother's form disintegrated into wisps of smoke before their eyes. The villagers gasped, shielding their eyes as the light washed over them, blinding them from seeing the disappearing figures. The dogs stopped barking, their barks replaced by an almost reverent silence. They lowered their heads as if sensing the transformation taking place. When the light dimmed, both Abeni and her ghostly figure of a mother had disappeared. The villagers stood in wonder, tears streaming down their faces, as they each walked slowly to their homes, thinking about what had just happened before their very eyes. In the weeks that followed, the village began to heal. They held a ceremony to honor the memory of the wronged woman, restoring her place in their history and acknowledging the pain they had inflicted. As the years passed, the tale of Abeni became a cherished story, reminding generations to come of the power of forgiveness and the importance of facing the past. Even though this story ended with forgiveness, some other families embraced vengeance, and this story right here is a classic example. Watch it next, and thanks so much for watching this one.